Okay, in this video I'm going to show you how to stabilize some rock that's really unusable unless you do it. This is some Eudialyte, and it's very granular. I can go like this and pull crumbs off the side, so when you go to cut it and grind and polish it, it tends to really break down and not look very good. So stabilizing it is actually putting in a vacuum chamber and pulling the gas out of all the little cavities between the granular structure of the rock, and then when you if it's in epoxy, then it when you take the vacuum off, the epoxy gets drawn into the spaces that you pulled the gas out of. So it works very good for a rock like this. I've sliced up a whole bunch of this stuff here, and I'll show you how to do it. Okay, here we have a stainless steel pot, and here's a vacuum pump, and these are my pieces of rock, and this is the lid. You just make sure it's clean. This is just a gasket around here. Make sure there's nothing on it because it gets sucked down onto the pot and seals there. And you have gauges and on-off valves to let the air out and then let the air back in when it's done. So this starts at 0, and I think it's like 1 atmosphere is what this does, close to it. I'm not entirely sure of that, but so it is. So we just put all the rocks in the pot, and then we're using the epoxy. It's cactus juice, and it is activated, but it won't go hard until you heat it. So we don't have to worry about going hard in the pot or anything. We put it in there and use it, and then we put it in a little toaster oven to finish it off for 2 hours, and it will make it kick off. And then any you don't use in the pot, you can just pour back in. It's supposed to be good for a year or something like that. They use it for pens and stuff like that. But that's the stuff we're doing. So put the rocks in and get back to you. Okay, now I have all the rocks in that pot. You can see them in there. And the epoxy's covering. I have some other rock in there, but ignore that. That's for a friend of mine. And you put the top on here. You make sure that lip is nice and clean underneath. And that's off. So you always start it with the that off. And this is the chamber, and we'll just fire that up. As soon as it's going, you just, and the air starts going out. You'll see the vacuum start happening there. Okay, and once it's going, you can see all the bubbles in there, so that's pulling the gas from the rock. If there was nothing in there, it really wouldn't be bubbling at all, right? So you just have to make sure when you first started it doesn't really bubble right up to get on this plastic here. You want to kind of protect that a little. But this is going to be fine. You can see it's just going like that, and I can leave it for, like hours. This looks like there's going to be a lot of gas in there because there's so many spaces. So this will last a long time, and with a small pump like this pump might get warm, so I can turn it off and let it cool and keep this on, and I can tell by the gauge here that it's not going back towards 0. So that means it's holding its vacuum, that it's not going to start the gas going back in the rock while I cool off the chamber. And you can still see, even if I left it off for 15 minutes, you can still see a little bit of bubbles come out of the rock if I did that. So it's working fine. It's not reversing anyway, to let the motor cool down. And I might do it a few times because I don't want to run it for 2 hours straight. It's probably too hard on that little motor. So I'll just leave this go, check it every once in a while, and maybe half an hour I'll turn it off for a bit. But it's working just like that. Okay, now it's been running a while, so we want to let the motor cool down. It's a little bit warm, so you always want, let me get back here. Always want to turn this here off first, and then turn the pump off, because you don't want anything getting sucked up out of the pump back into there, right? So you just turn that off after. And if you can see in here, it's gonna keep bubbling, and it will even stay bubbling when I come back to turn it back on. And that just shows the vacuum is still there and it's still sucking the air out. You wouldn't want it to reverse now, or I would just have to get a better motor, but that seems to work just fine. And I'll come let that cool, and I'll do it a few times till the bubbles almost stop in there when it's on, and then I'll just turn it off, open the vacuum here, and let air back in, and then just leave it overnight. You're supposed to leave it, generally the rule is twice as long as you've been vacuuming out, to let the epoxy go in all the spaces. So I just leave it overnight, and then in the morning I'll put it in my little toaster oven, and it'll be done. Okay, I've had this running for a couple hours now. I will shut the pump off and see how things are. Okay, with the pump off, you want to release this really slow, so it'll just splash right up. If you go crazy, you can't see in there, but you can see it jumping around. If I just let that valve go, it would splash all over the place inside. And you can see that go back to 0 on the gauge. And then that's it. Just lift that off, out of the way. It's not great light in here, but you can see the rocks I have in there. And now I'll just leave them till the morning, instead of trying to figure out what's best, 3 hours done or 4 hours done. I'll just cover this thing just to keep the crap out of there. Like I said, after I take them out, I can reuse all the cactus juice. It's a type of epoxy. And I'll just in the morning put them in the oven. Okay, it's the morning. I pulled out the pieces that were in the epoxy, and you can see there's a little bit of juice draining off them, and this is I can just filter those few little crumbs in there out and put that right back in my jug and reuse it. It's fine. And I'll just put these in the toaster oven for at least 2 hours. I'll do it for 2.5, and it says 200. I'll do it upwards of 250 because it's not a very good toaster oven. It varies. If you don't do it enough, you're really screwed. So you have to do it long enough and hot enough. Okay, I have them in the oven like that. A pan is probably better. You don't want any holes in it, so it just that little bit of epoxy drips down into your oven before it firms up. But I'll just put it like that for about 2.5 hours, and then see what we have. Okay, I've got the rocks out of the little toaster oven, and the epoxy went off really nice for me, so I'll maybe go ahead and make a cab out of some pieces in there. So that's quite a bit of stuff, and like I said, it's not really usable because it's so granular, and it just doesn't get a smooth surface when you do it. It's such a nice rock, and it's rare. It's good to have a way to save it, and that'll be my last piece of that there. But I'll show you when I finish cabbing one. Okay, there's some done ones. That's a cabochon here, and these are done in the style where I do both sides and I cut a little groove in the edge to hold the wire. So that's going to be a done pendant. I'll put that with some pearls or something like that. But these are very nice rocks, really unusable unless you stabilize it like that.
Okay, here's the piece of Eudialyte on a pearl necklace that I did. Oh, a little glary there. You can see it. Beautiful. And remember, if you like my videos, to give them a thumbs up and subscribe to my channel.